And in so doing, children are very similar to artists and scientists. This chemist, Polanyi, underlines the fact that the approach of scientists is a playful one, is essential to discoveries. So the fact that somehow scientists play when they discover is essential for their discovery. And he explains this by saying that the creative act for artists and scientists, that is the act of discovery, and for the scientists, and the creative act for the artist must, like playing, exceed and overcome the formal rules. Polanyi says that to artists and scientists there are no instruction manuals. Scientific discovery, therefore, is not the result of the application of a logic procedure, of a preset rule. Of course, the logic ability is a necessary factor, together with other factors, though. For example, the genius and hard work of the researchers, the possibility of working in a team, very often, and also technological progress, which is often at the basis of many scientific discoveries. And very often, if the discovery is an important one, managerial capabilities and coordination are also required. In no case, though, is scientific discovery a pure or a mere consequence of all these factors. There are no instruction manuals, neither for artists nor for scientists. We're not here today to talk about scientific discoveries in abstract terms. We would like to understand what scientific discoveries are all about, what type of experience a scientific discovery is. We would like to understand what scientific discoveries imply from the point of view of reason. We're going to do so in the only possible way, by hearing the testimony of those that have experienced and are still experiencing discoveries. We're lucky enough to do so at top level. Today, we have three true giants in contemporary science. They have witnessed a major human adventure, that is scientific discovery. Let me introduce them very briefly. I would like to simply give you some information about their experience, their professional and human background. Yves Coppens, sitting to my left. Yves Coppens is one of the greatest paleoanthropologists of all times. He is Professor Emeritus at the Collège de France, and he was also Professor of the National Museum of Natural History in Paris. He developed a passion for prehistory as a very young man, as he was telling me at lunch. Maybe he started almost as if he was playing with prehistory. With CNRS, he has, since 1956, led major expeditions throughout the world, in Chad, Ethiopia, North and South Africa, Mauritania, Indonesia, Philippines, China, Siberia, and Mongolia. A couple of weeks ago, he was in Mongolia, where he's currently carrying out an important piece of research. He discovered something like 1,000 remains of hominids, and these discoveries allowed him to find new explanations on the appearance of the Homo genus 3 million years ago and Australopithecus Ardipithecus 7 million years ago. He was also the director of the Musée de l'Homme in Paris, and he is the chair of paleoanthropology and prehistory at the Collège de France, and has held this position since 1980. He is the author of 1,000 scientific papers, many books. He was awarded a large amount of prizes. I cannot list them all. He is the member of many distinguished cultural and scientific academies in Italy, in Europe and France. But also, Yves is actually back to the meeting because he took part in one of the earliest editions of the meeting in 1983. And on that occasion, he was also the curator on one of the first scientific exhibitions on the origin of man. So we're really grateful to him for coming back.
Grazie. Alla destra.
To my right, we have John Mather, the Nobel laureate for physics. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics in 2006. John is senior astrophysicist at the Goddard Space Flight Center, NASA, Maryland. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2006 because of the measurements of the cosmic microwave background with the Coppens satellite, and he shared the Nobel Prize with George Smoot, who was here a couple of years ago. Maybe you remember him. Not only is he a Nobel laureate, he was awarded really a large number of prizes. I can't mention them, but the rate is one prize per year, one award per year. And the most recent one is the Robinson Prize that he was awarded just some months ago. He's one of the most famous scientists in the US. And to give you an idea of his importance and reputation, in 2007, Time magazine said that he's one of the 100 most influential people in the world. John Mather is at the present time senior project scientist at the James Webb Space Telescope. He is the key person in the design and development of the new space telescope generation after the Hubble Space Telescope. And the launching of this new telescope is envisaged for 2014. John Mather is also a professor of physics at the University of Maryland, College Park. Thank you, John.
E infine alla mia destra Charles.
And to my right, Charles Townsend. Charles Townsend was Nobel laureate for physics in 1964, when I was only 4 years old. He was awarded the Nobel Prize because of his fundamental work on maser and laser, and he will talk about this. He's still professor at the Graduate School of the University of California, Berkeley. He initially worked at Bell Labs, and then starting from the 20s, he was professor of physics at many of the most prestigious American universities, such as Columbia University, MIT, Enrico Fermi International School of Physics, and also the University of California, Berkeley. Charles Townsend led many committees on space and defense in the US, and he also led the advisory committee for the first moon landing of Apollo 11, and we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of moon landing this year. Charles Townsend also worked at the relationship between science and faith. He was among the first scientists to deeply express his opinion on this topic, and he published several books and articles on this topic. He also reported his scientific experience with all the human implications that this has. This was especially through a book titled How the Laser Happened, Adventures of a Scientist. Because of his broad multidisciplinary approach to science, he was awarded the Templeton Prize in 2005. Charles Townsend, together with Mother Teresa, are the only two people who were awarded both the Templeton Prize and the Nobel Prize. We're really thankful to all of you, and now it's time for questions. This meeting will be as follows. They will have to answer 2 questions in turn. They will explain something about themselves, so I'm asking you the following questions. You've all been the protagonists of far-reaching, epoch-making scientific discoveries in very different fields. Yves Coppens discovered the fossil remains of Lucy, the hominid, which shed new light on the origins of mankind. But not only this, as he will explain to us. John Mather measured accurately the microwave background spectrum, that is the primordial light of the universe. And Charles Townsend discovered a fundamental mechanism in light emission, which led to the discovery of laser, which has technology applications worldwide in the entire universe, and these applications concern us all, even if we don't realize this completely. So my first question to the 3 of you is the following. Please tell us briefly what the content of your discovery is. How did it happen, and how and what happened? Which were the main factors making your discovery possible? Were there personal situations which made the difference to you? And what did you perceive when you came across this discovery? The world around you, the scientific community, how, and the public in general, how did they accept your discovery? The floor to Yves Coppens first.
Thank you very much. So Marco Bersanelli asked me to talk to you about Lucy and in English. That's so? So Lucy is a skeleton, a part of a skeleton actually, of a hominid 3.2 million years old, found in eastern Ethiopia, in Afar area, in a place called Hadar, in 1974, by an international expedition that I was co-leading. And in 1978, Lucy has been formally called Australopithecus afarensis, formal name that I also, of course, co-signed. So I'm happy to talk about Lucy as her co-father and co-godfather. But the discovery of Lucy has actually been a sort of succession of events. I would say a successive event, so to speak. I personally have been involved in several previous expeditions and had already been discoverer of many other hominids. And I have been co-discoverer of hominid stuff in Hadar, in the Lucy's site, as soon as 1973, so the year before Lucy. So the discovery of hominid remains in 1974 in another locality, Lucy's locality, AL288, has not been a surprise. Such a discovery is always interesting, of course, but almost expected. We were very happy the day the two first Lucy's bones have been collected, but that's all. We just programmed for the day after to go back to the site and to look carefully around. The day after, more hominin bones have been found, so we were happy again, but it was not yet a super event. But then, after several days, and after having sieved an important quantity of sand and collected quite a large quantity of bones, we thought that they all could have come from only one skeleton, because they were of the same color, same density, same caliber, and because we had not get two left tibias, two right humerus, 3 skulls of 4 lower jaws. This possibility, this probability was becoming a much bigger and much better true scientific event. Having at last 52 identified bones of an individual 3.2 million years old allowed us to know its size, its extrapolate weight, 25 kilos, allowed to describe its joints, understand its locomotion and deductive behavior with the methods of comparative anatomy and biomechanics. So this was really becoming a big, increasing event. And then the discovery of the pelvis, half pelvis actually, gave us the sex of this possible individual, a female. This information, sort of luxurious complementary one, became an anecdotic but emotional event. It was another kind of event again. So we have seen a successive event, a scientific event, an emotional event, and we will see a worldwide symbolic event. One day, when marking the bones, which is a bit boring, we were listening to a tape of the Beatles, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, that I will interpret. No. No. Don't mention it. And we thought that the nickname of Lucy would be nicer than AL288 for this person. And the personality of Lucy was born. Probably because this pre-lady was tiny, geologically old, personally young, exotic ancestor of man with a well-known nickname, she became a sort of emblematic fossil, star of the savannah, symbol of our research on man's origins and evolution. And we, the discoverers, were ourselves a bit surprised by her success. It's important to know that today have been discovered several hominids geologically older than Lucy, which means at least that Lucy is not that old. Because of her bones fused and because of her teeth all erupted, we said that Lucy was 20 years old. 20 years is a nice age today, but a very old age for a pre-woman at that time. Because of her prognatism, projection of the face, because of her big cheek teeth, because of her geological age, so close to the first man's one, Lucy, for me, cannot be our ancestor. And after the discovery in South Africa, in Sterkfontein, of a complete skeleton of hominid of almost the same age, Lucy is not the most complete skeleton of pre-human ever known. So, Lucy is still tiny, but not that old geologically, not that young personally, not our ancestor, not that complete, but she is still emblematic of my field, and I guess that she will remain our symbol for a long time, if not forever. And don't forget, she has been a progressive event, a true scientific event, and she still is an emotional event and a fantastic, emblematic one. Bravo, Lucy.
Grazie. Splendido, grazie.
Wave Lucy.
John Mather.
So you have the same question?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I am working on the origin of humanity in a very different way. As a child, I asked my father, where did we come from? How did we get here? And of course, he did not know. So, as an adult astronomer, I am now part of a worldwide team of thousands of people trying to read the book of the universe, to look back in time, and by looking at things that are very far away, to see how the universe came to be and how it came to be possible for galaxies and stars and planets and people to exist. So we are like geologists and historians and archaeologists, and we look back at old things to understand ourselves. So the discovery that made our particular group famous was a very precise measurement of the heat of the Big Bang itself. Now, the Big Bang is said to have occurred 13.7 thousand million years ago, and it was extremely hot and extremely dense, and it contained everything that we can see in our entire universe, even though, according to calculation, it had a diameter of only 10 centimeters at the time. So the great measurements to be made are to determine whether this fantastic theory could actually be true. So we measured it very carefully, and we think that it is true. So I'd like to say a little bit about the history of this kind of discovery. The discoveries really go back to the development of the first astronomical instruments, which we celebrate this year as the 400th anniversary of Galileo's use of the telescope on the sky. So there is a worldwide celebration, the International Year of Astronomy, this year in celebration of that. So jump ahead to 1905, and we have a theoretical discovery where Albert Einstein explained to us about relativity, and this was a complete shock to the entire world of science. He said that space and time are not separate, but are indeed mixed together. And in 1916, he gave us an even bigger surprise. He gave us a theory of gravity for the entire universe that works with relativity, and it says that that gravitation works across the universe by curving space and time. So he gave us the equations to calculate the expansion of the universe, but he said everyone knows the universe is not expanding. So he put a little number into his equations so he could explain why the universe did not expand. But in 1922, a young Russian scientist and mathematician calculated from Einstein's equations that the universe must be expanding. And he tried to explain this to people, and Einstein said, no, of course that's wrong. In 1927, the calculation was repeated by a Jesuit scholar, and he calculated that the universe should have started with a primeval atom, he called it. His name was Georges Lemaitre. And he wrote again to Einstein to explain his theory. Einstein said, no, you're very wrong, you're a bad scientist, everyone knows the universe is not expanding. So 2 years later, Edwin Hubble, using the great 100-inch, that is 2.4 meters, telescope at Mount Wilson in California, discovered that indeed the universe is expanding. So that's the same year that we remember as the worldwide economic collapse. But scientific discovery was a tremendous story across the world that year. So Hubble showed that distant galaxies are going away from us with a speed proportional to distance. Now, a little while later, in 1946, I was born, and I started thinking about science soon afterwards, because my father was telling me stories about cells and chromosomes, and my parents read to us from biographies of Galileo and Darwin. So I thought science is very exciting and a little bit dangerous. So a few years later, it was discovered by calculation that stars explode and that they can create the chemical elements of life. So in 1950s, it was not yet known that we are made of exploded stars, but now we know that from theory and now directly from many kinds of measurements. A few years later, in 1965, it was discovered that the primeval heat radiation from the Big Bang could actually be measured. And this primeval heat radiation is actually extremely bright, 1 microwatt per square meter, and we just do not have the right instruments to see it from here. So the discovery of that radiation led to the Nobel Prize very soon afterwards. Soon it was time for me to study professional science, and so I looked for a project to do to measure this cosmic background radiation, and it was a failure. But a few years after that, NASA requested proposals for new satellite missions, and so I said to my friends, let's propose a satellite to measure this cosmic background radiation, the primordial heat radiation. And amazingly enough, this proposal was selected by NASA. So it was proposed in 1974. The satellite was actually launched in 1989. So only a few weeks after launch, we were able to make our first announcement of our great discovery. Indeed, the predictions of the Big Bang matched exactly with what our instruments were showing. I showed a spectrum to the Astronomical Society, and we received a standing ovation, that is to say, a great cheer. Everyone was completely amazed at the perfection of the spectrum that we showed. So this is an occasion to describe the difference in experience between the scientists that discovered this result and the rest of the world. As a scientist, I fully expected this result. I was not surprised at all. I thought, surely this is how the universe works, but I'd better go find out. My scientific colleagues and the rest of the world had seen many measurements that said this was not true, and that in fact the universe had not started with the Big Bang, but something was the matter with the theory. So it was this tremendous sense of relief that the universe was what people wanted it to be, that was part of this standing ovation that our discovery received. So that's the first major discovery of our project. The second one was even more surprising. The universe is not exactly uniform, even in the Great Explosion. The Big Bang itself had hot and cold spots in it. And the hot and cold spots are not very different from one another. 10 parts per million difference in the temperature of this radiation. Nevertheless, we now believe that because the Big Bang it was not uniform, that it is now possible for us to exist. That we would not exist if the universe had not started off with the hot and cold spots of the Big Bang. So this was again a discovery which was different from what people quite expected. When the project was started, we did not know what to find. We just said, we will go measure what the universe has done. By the time that the project was launched, there were very strong predictions that we would see what eventually we did see, but no one knew if those predictions were true. So now we can now explain the existence of galaxies and clusters of galaxies and stars and planets based on the conditions that came from the Big Bang itself. So you also asked me what made it possible. And so I think there are a few factors I should perhaps mention. Number one, there's a tremendous amount of luck, of chance. Number two, of course, there are particular people that teach you how to do things, that give you an opportunity. But perhaps it's even good luck that my thesis project did not work right, because it somehow enabled me to think of how to do it better in space. Another very important thing was that space technology became available. This was just a few years, 5 years after the Apollo moon landing, and spacemen had walked on the moon. And so NASA was interested in scientific projects. So, as it happened, I had chosen a job, a place to work at NASA, and NASA had thousands of scientists and engineers working together so they could say, we know what to do when you want to make this measurement. So because of this amazing connection and sequence of events, all of which are very unlikely, we were able to make this team that was able to make the measurement of the Big Bang and tell you the story of how it comes to be that humans can exist coming from the great explosion 13.7 thousand million years ago.
Well, I'm going to tell you about my own experience in the invention of the laser. I was working at Bell Telephone Laboratories, and I wanted to do physics, but World War II was coming on, and so I was assigned the job of building a radar system with a wavelength of about 1 centimeter, that long. It was the shortest wavelength available, and that gave us better directivity. We could determine objects up in the sky. So I became an engineer and learned a lot about engineering. But after it was built, we found that those wavelengths were absorbed by water vapor in the atmosphere. That particular wavelength was absorbed, so the radar was no good. Wow. But I woke up to the fact that, well, maybe we can study water and other molecules with these microwaves, with these waves, because they absorb them. And so I started in the laboratory using our oscillators at 1 centimeter wavelength, studying water. And that gave nice information about water, its structure, and the nuclei in it. And we studied ammonia, and I could tell the spin of the nucleus of ammonia and nucleus of nitrogen and so on. So it gave a lot of exciting work, and as a result I got hired at Columbia University as a university professor. Well, I really wanted to do physics, so I went there. And it was an exciting field, but I wanted to get to shorter wavelengths. Now, radio oscillators, at that time, radio oscillators, electronic oscillators, couldn't get below about 3 millimeters, about that long. About 1/3 the length of what I had started with. I wanted to get down to shorter wavelengths because molecules and atoms kept absorbing it to shorter and shorter wavelengths. I wanted to get an oscillator, very pure oscillator, very pure frequency, so I could tune it and examine spectra below 1 millimeter, down in the infrared region even. I worked on this. My students worked on it. We tried various things. None of them worked. And then I was appointed a chairman of a national committee to try to find out how can we get oscillators and amplifiers down shorter than 1/2 centimeter. And this national committee traveled all around trying to find out ideas. And the last day of the national committee meeting was in Washington. And I woke up early in the morning worrying about it. We hadn't found an answer. And the breakfast wasn't ready, so I went out and sat on a park bench. I thought about it, and why hadn't we been able to get an answer? I tried this, I tried that, nothing worked. Suddenly, oh, a revelation. Oh, I see how to do it, I think. I can do it with molecules and atoms. Now, molecules and atoms have excited states. They can be an energy level like this and energy level like this. If the energy level here and a wave comes along, they can absorb the wave. They jump up here, they absorb the wave. If they're up here, if a wave comes along, they give up energy and fall down here and give energy to the wave. But now all molecules and atoms have more of them down here than up here. That's thermodynamics. They're more in lower energy than high energy. So there was molecules and atoms always absorbed. That's all been our experience. I said, wait a minute, we can arrange so molecules, more of them up here than down there, then a wave comes along, more of them will come down and go up, and we can get amplification. Wow. I wrote down the notes on a piece of paper, and I went back to Columbia, and my students and I tried to make one work. I got Jim Gordon and the graduate student trying to make it work. I tried to make it work first at about a centimeter wavelength using ammonia molecules. And Herb Zeiger, a postdoc, worked with me. We'd been working on it about 2 years. The chairman of the department came into my laboratory, and he got a Nobel Prize. And another professor who had a Nobel Prize, they both came in and said, look, you've got to stop. That's not going to work. We know it's not going to work. You know it's not going to work. You're wasting the department's money. Well, the great thing about a university is you can't fire a professor just because he's stupid. Once he gets appointed to professorship. So I said, no, I think it still has a chance to work. Are we going to work on it? 2 months later, Jim Gordon, the student, came into my classroom and said, it's working, and oh boy, the whole class went out and went, there it was. It's producing oscillations who are amplifying waves with molecules. Now, suddenly it became very famous and very exciting to everybody, and a lot of people went into the field. A lot of industrial companies started working on the field. It produced the world's best amplifiers and so on. And so it was a very busy field for a while. But I wanted to get down to still shorter wavelengths. This was in the microwave region, about a centimeter wavelength we'd produced, and everybody else was working there. And a lot of people had new ideas about it and so on. It was an exciting field. I wanted to get down to infrared, however. So I sat down at my desk and said, look, I want to see how to get it. I want to push on down to infrared. How do I do that? And I wrote down notes. Wrote down some of the theory of how many molecules I needed, how I could get them. I just said, hey, wait a minute. Looks like we can get right on down to light waves. Wow, we can get the molecules and atoms of not only infrared, right on down to light waves, shorter and shorter wavelengths down to light waves. That was about 1,000 times shorter than the long wave infrared I thought about first. I was consulting for Bell Telephone Laboratories at that time, and my brother-in-law, Arthur Sharlow, was there, and I talked with him about it. He said, oh, you know, I wondered about that, and I'm very interested because I work with you. So he worked with me, and he contributed some of the ideas, contributed using two parallel mirrors. So the light goes back and forth between two parallel mirrors. You have the molecules, excited state in here, and so you've got a light going straight back and forth and coming out. You let part of it come through the mirror, and then it makes a beam, and that's a laser. Well, now, interestingly, we took it to, I asked my brother-in-law to take it to the Bell Laboratories lawyers and let them patent it. And he called me up and said, well, the lawyers don't want to patent it because they say light has never been used for communication, won't be any use for Bell Laboratories, which is, of course, made telephones, communication. Light's never been in use for communication, so you patent it yourself, you can have the patent. I said, no, we mustn't cheat Bell Laboratories just because they don't understand. You go talk with them. So he talked to them, called me back, said, well, they say if we can show how it can be used for communication, then they'll patent it for Bell Labs. So we did. Made a patent called optical masers and communication. Now, we'd call the first device a maser, meaning microwave amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. You see, you stimulate the molecules, emit radiation, that amplifies. Laser, of course, is light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. They're the same thing, just different wavelengths. So that was a patent, and we wrote a paper about it, and everybody jumped in the field. Nobody thought it could be done. Nobody was interested until we wrote a paper about how to do it. Everybody jumped in the field, and it was all built. All the new lasers were built in industry. Industry was very interested. They had hired students from universities in the field. They supported them, and all the new lasers came from industry. The first one was invented by Ted Mayman at Hughes. I must say that also that when we first got one working, it was oscillating, gave a very pure frequency. I talked with two famous physicists, Niels Bohr and John von Neumann. I said, look, we've got this very pure frequency coming from molecules. Niels Bohr looked at me and said, look, no, that's not possible. You're crazy. You must misunderstand. You must misunderstand. No, that's not possible. I said, no, it's working. No, he never believed it. When Neumann said, oh, that's not possible, I said, no, it's working. I know it's working. Oh, you don't understand. He went off. We were at a cocktail party. He went off and got another drink. He came back 15 minutes later. Hey, you're right. Oh, you're right. Tell me about more. So on. So that was the beginning. And, of course, the laser is now producing billions of dollars of industry every year, billions of dollars of products every year, doing a lot of things for us, all kinds of things in biology. It's produced about 12 Nobel Prizes in science and so on, communications, all kinds of things. But that shows you how unexpected things come about and how basic science turns out to be very important frequently in industry and pays off enormously. It cost me about $50,000 to build the first one. Now, as I say, it's producing billions and billions of dollars every year in industry. Thank you.
Grazie Charles e grazie a tutti loro. La seconda domanda e ultima di questo.
Okay, we can now move on to the second question. The second question, although you have already partly given an answer, but it has a lot to do with the topic of our Rimini meeting. The title, as you can see, it's written everywhere, Knowledge is Always an Event. It would be very interesting to hear from you, in your opinion, in science, in the scientific field, I mean, every discovery somehow can be described as an event, as a novelty, as something unexpected. We have already talked about this. We've seen from the passion that you had while describing your previous experience. But also, I mean, when the discovery is the final result of a very long path where you are working and striving towards an objective, maybe you keep working for decades. And maybe you start off with an hypothesis. You have a hint, a clue, a hypothesis, and then you go on studying, and you end up discovering that what you had envisaged, that what you had in mind was indeed there. But then there is the novelty. You find something new. What is this novelty, in your opinion? Let's start from Yves.
Yes. So, to answer your second question, I would like to talk to you about another event, a scientific event completely unexpected, which is, I guess, my main discovery. I called it the Omo event with the H in brackets. Remember that. The Omo River, Omo without an H, is a 1,000 kilometers long Ethiopian river going roughly from north to south, from the high Ethiopian plateau, 3,000 meters high, down to the Lake Turkana in Kenya, around 400 meters high. We organized an expedition in the lower part of this Omo River, in the southwestern part of Ethiopia, in 1967, and worked there from 67 to 76, which means 10 years. Since the first field season, we were very impressed by the important thickness of the sediments, more than 1 kilometer, 1.2, of accumulation of sands and clays and gravels and ashes. And thanks to absolute dating that we did on the volcanic levels, we knew that this deposit was a little more than 3 million years old at the bottom, a little less than 2 million years old at the top. This deposit was full of fossil vertebrates, full of bones, and I personally collected and studied 50 tons of these bones. So the first important thing that we realized was that this accumulation, this kilometer of sediments, was a true succession, really documenting what happened, at least what happened there, between 3 and 2 million years ago. And it appeared almost immediately that the animals were not the same along this sequence. First result, first event, the faunas were changing between 3 and 2 million years, which was meaning that the environments, the climates were changing. And after having looked carefully at the animals, at their assemblages, at their ecosystem that they were documenting, it was clear that this climatic change, this climatic crisis between 3 and 2 million years ago had been going from humid to dry, from humid to dry. Second discovery, second event, I was attending a drought just in front of me. So I studied successively all the groups of animals of my collection. The elephants, the horses, the pigs, the rhinos were transforming their teeth, increasing the size of their teeth to be able to eat grasses better. Because the forest and even the savanna were decreasing, and because the open savanna and the steppe became the only available environment, less and less leaves, more and more grasses. The bovids of forest and thick bush were decreasing. The bovids of open countries adapted to run were increasing. The primates, the monkeys, were decreasing as well. The micro-mammals were demonstrating the same thing, going from forest and thick bush dwellers to dry savanna, steppe, and semi-desert species. The plants, the fossilized woods, the pollens were showing the same dramatic drought. And the important thing is that in these levels we had hominids, plenty of hominids. I collected several hundreds of bones and teeth of them. So what have been their behavior in front of such a crisis? Did they leave the country? Did they just disappear? Did they die? No, they adapt themselves to the new situation from pre-humans like Lucy, descend two new hominids, looking like two answers to the crisis, two ways to succeed in the adaptation to the changing climate, the changing landscape, the changing vegetation, the changing diet. The first hominid answer, the first hominid, was the so-called robust Australopithecus. It's a pre-human who had chosen in this new open and dry country a physical answer, a physical dissuasion, bigger size of the body, more massively built, impressive new masticatory equipment, and a skull with powerful superstructure. This whole equipment serves obviously for chewing vegetarian tough diet, fibrous plants and hard fruits, the only vegetation which was remaining at the beginning of this drought. And the second answer, the second new hominid, was the very first species of the genus Homo. It was man, just man. You know that? Can you realize that? So it's a pre-human who had chosen in this new open and dry country an intellectual answer, intellectual dissuasion. Homo has kept a gracile body, but has developed a much bigger brain than his pre-human ancestor. Look at that. From and Homo, because of the decrease of the vegetation, has adopted a clear omnivorous diet. Meat was really becoming a part of his feeding habits. His masticatory equipment changed. More meat in the menu. More meat means animal protein, good for the brain, means also hunting and mobility. More brain in the thought, or more thought in the brain, who knows? More brain means curiosity, means consciousness, means made tools, means invention of culture, and culture means new approaches of life, cognitive, intellectual, ethic, aesthetic, and spiritual. I published this discovery in 1975. So for man, 2 million years ago, it has been a fantastic event. And for me, in 1975, it has been also a fantastic scientific event. Thank you.
Well, it's hard to imagine finding something more exciting than our own ancestors. But I want to describe a little bit about how it is that giant astronomical projects become possible. and how it is that huge teams of scientists can be organized to accomplish them. So, in 1974, when our small satellite was proposed, there were committees of astronomers around the United States to think about what are the great challenges of our subject. And some of the committees said you have to go measure this cosmic background radiation very, very well. It's very, very important. Other committees said, that's not important. There's nothing there. It's not worth measuring. You can't find out anything. Everybody knows the Big Bang is all right anyway. And so clearly nothing to do. So we started our project at a time when it was not known whether there was anything to find. So during the process of getting the project approved by NASA, many theoretical predictions were made, ranging from difficult to measure to impossible to measure. So we did not know how hard we had to work. We did not know what the universe had given us to discover. So it was going to be a matter of luck, perhaps, if we could measure what we wanted to measure. So finally, as the project was approaching launch, the astronomers in many areas of work had learned how to calculate the things that we said we were going to be able to measure. So by the time that the project was launched, there were many, many theoretical predictions, and some of them were right and some of them were not. But this sort of illustrates that when a great measurement is about to be made, although the people who can do theoretical calculations, they must write their articles in advance so that they can say that they were right. And then who knows what nature is going to give. So that's part of how it comes that a large project can be started. Another one relates to, is the technology ready? Is it possible to make the measurement? And so when we started off the project, we said we knew how to make the detectors. Pretty soon it seemed that we did not know how to make the detectors. Then NASA said, well, we can't launch the project right now. Maybe we'll delay the project. So we said, let's try to make some better detectors. And we did actually find a way to make better detectors. So as it turned out in the end, the detectors we had built, the better detectors, were just barely good enough to make the great surprising discovery of the hot and cold spots in the Big Bang. If we had flown the design that we proposed, it never would have worked. It would not have been capable of finding the things that have made the project famous. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about the perception of discovery as an event. The discovery itself is an event that occurs separately and concurrently in many different people. When we have a team of people trying to make a discovery, one person may have an idea before the others, and this is actually what happened when it came to discovering the hot and cold spots of the Big Bang. One of our team members was more excellent, more expert, more quick than the others in making computer calculations. So he came to the science team one summer and said, I think that I have found the hot and cold spots of the Big Bang. And the rest of the science team said, well, that's very interesting, but what if you're not right? What if this is a wrong measurement? So we thought of dozens and dozens of more calculations to make, that the whole science team would have to repeat them and calculate them again to see that this was a correct result. There's a very strong feeling of the team that we must be right, that the terrible results of having announced a wrong result would last forever, and we would never avoid the embarrassment. So we would have to be right. So we spent many, many months checking the results. Finally, we were ready to announce them, And then by that time, I think the rumors had been circulating in the scientific world that we had something to say, but they knew that we had been very careful. And so there's been almost no challenge to the results. When the results were finally announced, they were accepted as true by astronomers around the world. Finally, the theories that they had been promoting were confirmed. And now we have probably thousands and thousands of scientific papers based on the single discovery of the hot and cold spots in the Big Bang radiation. So this is to say that the event that we describe as discovery is a dynamic one. It lasts over many days, weeks, or months, and sometimes requires decades of preparation as one is trying to construct the apparatus or the theoretical tools that will enable the discovery. And it's also very different according to the perspective of the people. The people that are actually making the measurement are very different from the ones who are making the calculations or reporting it. This is, I think, typical of an event. Each person that's come to the event here in Rimini has a different experience as well. So there's no such thing as a single event. There's a very large and complex event that we try to describe as discovery. And now I'd like to say a little bit about what will come next. NASA is busy building, as you mentioned, the successor telescope for the Hubble Space Telescope. It will be called the James Webb Space Telescope. And this is a telescope which is used, like the Hubble telescope, by small teams of astronomers who request time to observe their particular favorite targets in space, and they hope to make a discovery. So this is a completely different organization process where many thousands of engineers will build an astonishing tool, and then many thousands of other astronomers who did not build the telescope are going to use it to make their discoveries. So I think it's quite possible that there will be another Nobel Prize coming from that telescope, but it's completely impossible to anticipate what it will be. Now, it will be launched in 2014, and those of you who are astronomers will have the opportunity to write proposals to observe your favorite targets with this telescope, and you have your chance to become a Nobel Prize winner. And there will be a wonderful discovery coming. So good luck.
Charles, your last word.
Revelations come about in many ways, but they almost always involve intense work, interest, and I want to give first a history of a couple of things that I've seen where the revelation was an accident, you might say. People weren't looking for this and suddenly discovered it. Of course, in the case of the laser, I was looking for it and I discovered it, and that was a revelation. But there are also accidental revelations. I was at Bell Laboratories when the transistor was discovered. Walter Bratton was studying the oxide of carbon on carbon. He was, on copper. The oxide of copper on copper. He was measuring the resistance of this oxide on the metal copper. He found a peculiar effect he didn't understand. And he went to John Bardeen, who was a theoretical physicist at Bell Labs, said, what in the world is this? I don't understand what I've got, why it's doing this. And Bardeen looked at it And he said, hey, you've got amplification. That's amplification. Wow. Now, Bill Shockley was their boss, and he was very interested, of course, and he jumped into the field. So the three of them then invented the transistor. Accident, but as a result of careful investigation by Walter Brattain of something else. Similar case is the discovery of the Big Bang. One of my former students is Arno Penzias, and I encouraged him to look for hydrogen in interstellar space. He used a maser amplifier, which is the most sensitive amplifier at the time, and he got a job at Bell Labs. He continued to look there, and with Bob Wilson and he worked together. They were looking for hydrogen. They didn't find hydrogen, but they found something funny. They found some radiation up there that seemed to be coming from all directions, more or less constant, and they discovered the Big Bang, the origin of the universe of all things. So they looked for hydrogen and accidentally discovered the origin of the universe. Now, these surprises are also, revelations are also surprises, and sometimes revolutionize our ideas in such a way that many people don't want to believe them. I've already mentioned that Niels Bohr and John von Neumann didn't want to believe the maser when I had it operating, and many people were skeptical. In the case of the Big Bang, well, that's very understandable in terms of religious beliefs, that there was an origin of the universe, but most scientists thought there couldn't be. Einstein, in fact, said very vehemently, no, there can't be a beginning of the universe. That's stupid. Absolutely can't be a beginning of the universe. Eventually, the evidence convinced him. Wow, there was. The universe began of all things. How in the world, we don't know. So these revelations are real revelations, and they change our ideas in many cases. They can come about by accident, but accident only generally is a result of careful examination of something. And you look carefully at what you're finding, and you can find something completely surprising you're not looking for. In our particular case, we were in fact trying to produce short waves, and tried without much success until suddenly I had this revelation sitting on a park bench. An idea came, where does revelation come from? Who knows? Creation. But also, new things are things which many people won't accept initially. Even scientists are locked into the positions such it's very hard for them to change at times. We must be ready to be open-minded, change our ideas, look carefully at new things that turn up and see what they mean and try to understand them. Now, I want also to emphasize the importance in discovery of a wide variety of fields. Different fields have to interact. Different people interact. The laser came about because I had a background in electrical engineering and in quantum mechanics, which not a lot of people had then. I could join the two together. Discoveries frequently come about as a result of interaction of different fields, interaction of different people, and so on. So people interact, sciences interact. We keep exploring the sciences, expanding them further and further, and we'll find out more. What new things are going to be found, we don't now know. That's the point. They are new. They don't now know. It'll be exciting to see what comes along. So I look forward to what you young people are going to do in the next few decades. You'll do surprising things which now people think are impossible. I want to comment that just another example of how people think of things that are impossible. Very famous, the most famous British scientist at the time, back in the 19th century, late 19th century, said, travel with anything heavier than air is impossible. I don't believe anything can go travel in air other than a balloon. And we can't make anything that travels in air other than a balloon. And several very important scientists said that in Great Britain, made public announcements about that and so on. They want to discourage people from trying. Well, about a decade later, the Wright brothers had an airplane going. almost every new revelation is something people don't believe in initially. Some people don't believe in. We're fixing our ideas, and we must try to be more open-minded, as well as exploring everything, and exploration pays off. Thank you.
Ma nel ringraziare I nostri ospiti, credo.
I really would like to thank our guests. Thank you very much. Now, we said that knowledge is always an event. Now, communicating knowledge is also an experience in the scientific field, as we've seen firsthand today. Knowledge implies a meeting of a subject, of a man, of a human community, of a human being with an object, the object of study. It is an encounter. It's an encounter, and this can be then told by those who go through the process, by those who tell us about this dynamic, this process, what they've been studying. And it's amazing to see that the method for gaining knowledge is based on experience. And I mean, we keep reflecting and thinking about our perception about reality, and we analyze it using our intelligence, our reason, without any prejudice, without any fixed idea, which sometimes can hamper our thinking. We have to find a healthy way of using our reason for many different fields in life. I mean, and reason has to be based on experience. Einstein himself had to bend in front of observation of reality, although it was in contrast with his ideas. And it really, it's moving to see what the Pope wrote, sending his message to the Rimini meeting. The Pope wrote the following. He wrote that knowledge cannot be described as something which is perceived or seen by an innocent bystander or onlooker. You have to be involved in the object of study, and this is a condition sine qua non for knowledge itself. Accepting the object of study, be ready to listen, be open. One has to be ready to listen, to understand, and you have to love the truth. You have to be searching for the truth. We have to be lovers of the truth. And this readiness is that you must be fond of objects. You have to love objects. And I think we have to be educated to do this so that we can understand reality down to its deepest meaning. Thank you very much.